Alexander Alekhine, 1892-1946, was one of the greatest attacking players who ever lived. Born to a wealthy aristocratic family in Moscow, he became a strong master by his late teens. In 1914, young Alekhine captured first place in a strong international tournament in Moscow, and then played in the famous St Petersburg 1914 Grandmasters of Chess tournament, and finished third behind world champion Emanuel Lasker of Germany and Cuban genius Jose Raoul Capablanca. Alekhine was interned briefly by the Germans while playing in a tournament in Mannheim, Germany, just as World War I started. He managed to return to Russia and served in the ambulance corps on the Russian-Austrian front. Wounded, he developed his skills as a simultaneous blindfold chess expert while recovering in the hospital. He later accomplished the incredible feat of playing 32 opponents blindfolded, winning 19, losing 4, and drawing 9. In 1927, Alekhine, now a French citizen, defeated Jose Capablanca in an epic match played in Buenos Aires, Argentina. He held his title until defeated by the Dutch math professor Max Euwe in 1935. He won back his crown in 1937 and held the title of world champion until his death in 1946. As a youngster, I was fascinated by the brilliance and deep conceptions of Alekhine. His ideas almost seemed too big for the chessboard. Attack was his forte, and he was a very dedicated student of the game, working harder than most of his peers. Alekhine's opponent in the game we are about to analyze, Emanuel Lasker, 1868-1941, holds the record for the longest reign as world champion. Lasker held the title from 1894, when he defeated Wilhelm Steinitz, until 1921, when he lost to Capablanca. Where Alekhine was a chess artist, Lasker was the practical businessman. He cared about results, not beauty. Extremely tenacious and resourceful, Lasker was the master of refuting unsound attacks. Brilliant attackers like Marshall, Janowski, and Spielman, and others wore themselves out trying to overwhelm the level-headed Lasker. Not surprisingly, Lasker wrote a book called Common Sense in Chess. In the game we are about to examine, we see Alekhine at the top of his game. Lasker was getting on in years, but was still a very tough customer. It is striking how Alekhine powerfully builds up his attack, till a final combinative finale settles matters.
D4 D5 C4 E6 Knight C3 Knight F6 Knight F3 Bishop E7 Bishop G5 Knight B D7 E3 Castle kingside Rook C1 C6.
Lasker has selected the Queen's Gambit declined against Alekhine's 1d4 opening. The QGD is a very solid classical defense that aims at achieving a stable, weakness-free position out of the opening. The QGD is a little stodgy, but very tough to beat. Usually, white comes away from the opening with greater control of territory, but not much else.
Bishop D3 D takes C4 Bishop takes C4 Knight D5 Bishop takes E7 Queen takes E7 Knight E4.
Here, Alekhine avoids the trade of pieces, which is a standard theme when you have a greater control of space.
Knight 5 F6.
Lasker continues to offer a trade of pieces, but Alekhine again refuses, and settles his knight on a good square within proximity to Black's king.
Knight G3 E5.
Lasker plays the standard freeing break, and the center is aired out. The center will remain the main battlefield, but by piece control, not pawns.
Castle kingside. E takes D4. Knight F5.
This knight becomes a true thorn in Black's side. It is extremely well placed, but efforts to expel the knight might prove more harmful than if the knight stands in place, i.e. the cure is worse than the disease.
Queen D8. Knight 3 takes D4. Knight e5. Bishop e3. Bishop takes f5. Knight takes f5. Queen b6.
A very weak move by Lasker. The queen is not well placed on b6 and basically just becomes part of the scenery. In other words, a potted plant. Her absence from the center and kingside will be quickly and painfully felt.
Queen d6.
This powerful move by Alekhine begins a kingside attack that cannot be parried. The queen will work in unison with the minor pieces to create fatal weaknesses in the enemy camp.
Knight e d7.
Lasker, no doubt regretting his weak 17th move, tries some damage control.
Rook f d1. Rook a d8. Queen g3. g6.
The first breach in Black's king position is achieved. Alekhine steps up the pressure by bringing fresh forces to bear on the kingside.
Queen g5. King h8. Knight d6.
As we saw in that Steinitz-Bartoleben game, knights planted deep into the enemy's position can be an awesome attacking tool. Alekhine attacks the f7 square now, and forces the black king to again expose himself.
King g7. e4.
A multi-purpose move by Alekhine. The pawn stands ready to support the knight on d6 with e4, e5, and also gets out of the way for a rook lift along the third rank.
Knight g8.
A weak defense by Lasker. The only way to prolong the struggle was with the exchange sacrifice rook d8, which leads after knight takes e8, rook takes e8, rook c2, rook takes e4, h3, to a better position for white, but one that's not easy to convert to victory.
Rook d3.
Alekhine makes full use of all of his assets. The introduction of the rook to join the hunting party is decisive.
f6.
Knight df6 was the only hope, but white's attack is decisive after rook e1. Then h6, knight f5 check, king h7, rook h3, threats all over the place, g takes f5, forced, e5, look at that black king side, it's a total mess, queen d4, only chance, queen takes f5 check, king g7, rook g3 check, king h8, black's king side looks bullet-riddled, e takes f6, knight takes f6, and now the safety move h3 should give white a decisive advantage.
Knight f5 check. King h8. Queen takes g6.
This beautiful sacrifice is the culmination of Alekhine's well-executed attack. White threatens queen g7 mate, and of course capture of the queen leads to rook h3 check, knight h6, rook takes h6 mate. So of course Emanuel Lasker resigned.